Outside of the UFC, ONE FC had an event featuring ex-UFC fighter Sage Northcutt. Really interesting in the sense that we've had a few now UFC fighters go over to ONE FC with mixed success, and generally leaning on the side of not very successful. In this instance, he was fighting a kickboxing champion known as Cosmo Alexandre, and only 29 seconds into the fight was brutally knocked out with a hard right hand. It turns out that he received 8 facial fractures as a result of this hit. So the bones around his skull and face had been fractured in 8 different places. He's posted since from surgery saying that everything's fine, surgery was successful, but man, that must have been a punch. The replay was quite impressive. It looked painful, to say the very least. And again, it's just another, it builds on the story of, is the best fighters in the world at the UFC? And I think to try and answer that with a yes or no answer is just, it's showing a ridiculous level of ignorance. The world is a very big place. And yes, UFC is the largest commodity in mixed martial arts. But to assume that unless you are fighting under the UFC, that you cannot be one of the very best in the world is quite frankly ridiculous. And vice versa, to say that you're a UFC fighter, so therefore you should basically be able to trample anyone in these other organizations. It's just not the case. At the end of the day, all of these guys and girls are humans. And a human can win or lose on any day. Now, the better you are, the more experienced you are, the more special you are in terms of your genetics and just the way you've trained and your camp and your coaching, you can really affect that statistic. Your John Joneses as a prime example. They do everything right, maybe even some things a bit wrong, to ensure and to help build. But that doesn't mean John can't lose. That doesn't mean that John can't take a defeat or be knocked out or be submitted or have a mistake. These things happen. So to try and use a one case scenario like Sage Northcutt here and say that this tells you anything about it other than the fact that this game of ours that we like to play, this MMA world, is very unpredictable. Say he didn't take that shot, say the fight went on a little bit longer, maybe he swerved that one, maybe it would have been completely the other way around. We don't know, maybe exactly the same thing would have happened. Looking at it, when you watch that 29 seconds, Sage seemed to have some fear of the power that was coming his way. He backed up onto the ropes, got kind of cornered off, and that's where that punch just went. Bang, crack landed and took him straight down. So, nothing but props to Cosmo for his performance and wishing Sage nothing but the best in terms of his recovery. But all this does is add to a very complicated picture and a very large picture of where the best fighters are and who the best fighters are. You can use the example of Eddie Alvarez, who lost to a very formidable and recognized opponent. You could say about Demetrius Johnson, who faced adversity in his new division before eventually eking out the win. We could even look at the other way around with Ben Askren coming over to UFC and not having the easiest time with Robbie Lawler and that controversial win. But every fight we have, the next fight that Askren has with Masvidal, the next round of the Grand Prix for Demetrius, and whatever's going to happen with the likes of Alvarez and Sage Northcutt down the line when they return, it'll be interesting to see. It's going to paint a clearer picture. And this industry evolves and these fighters, move on with their careers, I think we'll see more crossovers and we'll get more opportunities to really see where the best are. But I don't think the answer is that they will be in one place or the other. I think when you look across all these organizations, there is clear evidence for who the top fighters are And that's not necessarily reserved to being in the UFC, being in Bellator, being in 1FC, being in an unknown organization somewhere in the world. A huge part of this game is marketing. A huge part of this game is luck, is being in the right place at the right time and getting caught the call or getting noticed, bringing yourself out there, being entertaining, being interesting. All of these things help with getting you there, as well as just your pure, unrivaled talent and ability at the sport and at the martial arts.